Paul Atreides has always been one of the most fascinating characters in sci-fi, and with Dune Part 3 on the horizon, there's a lot of attention on what drives him next. Based on what's been hinted at so far, it's clear the upcoming movie will explore Paul's deepest fears, especially the ones surrounding the woman he loves. After Dune Part 2 crushed it at the box office and with fans, director Denis Villeneuve is set to adapt Dune Messiah, the novel that was written more as a follow-up reflection than a direct sequel to the original Dune. It dives deep into heavier, more complex territory, mostly centered on the dangerous nature of power. Villeneuve always had a clear plan. He wanted to tell Paul's story across 3 movies, ending with Messiah. While the Dune universe does stretch far beyond that, introducing wild ideas like human sandworm hybrids and clones, it starts to pivot toward different characters like Paul's son, Leto II. But for now, the focus is still very much on Paul and how he handles everything he's become. One of the most important emotional threads in Messiah is Paul's relationship with Chani. His love for her isn't just some romantic subplot, it's the heart of what keeps him grounded. Even though he's viewed by the Fremen as a messianic figure, Lisan al-Gaib, his bond with Chani makes him feel more human. But it's also where his fears lie the deepest. Thanks to his prescient abilities, Paul sees a future where Chani dies during childbirth. That looming possibility shapes so many of his choices. Now, this fear doesn't come out of nowhere. There's a reason it hits so hard. Paul knows that Princess Irulan, who is supposed to be his wife in name only, is secretly giving Chani contraceptives to prevent her from having a child. Irulan, being aligned with the Bene Gesserit, has her own reasons, mainly to make sure any heir comes from her, not a Fremen like Chani. So when Chani finally gets pregnant, Paul becomes consumed with anxiety, worried that her pregnancy could be fatal. What makes this conflict even more compelling is that Paul is struggling to protect the one person who truly anchors him emotionally, even though he holds terrifying influence over the entire universe. That disconnect, being powerful on a cosmic level but powerless in something as intimate as childbirth, adds a deep irony to his story. Interestingly, Dune Part 2 already gave us a glimpse of this internal conflict. In one of Paul's visions, he sees Chani dying in a nuclear explosion, which isn't quite the same as dying in childbirth, but the emotion behind the scene serves the same purpose. It plants the seed for Paul's desperation to protect her in Part 3, regardless of how the circumstances play out. That vision also reveals how Villeneuve has been laying the groundwork for Dune Part 3 since the beginning. He didn't just want to adapt Dune, he wanted to tell a complete arc for Paul, from a reluctant noble to a man burdened by the consequences of absolute power. Dune Messiah was always intended as the final chapter of that arc, and while the book continues the broader saga, it also serves as a cautionary tale about idolizing charismatic figures. So even if Messiah isn't the most action-packed of the Dune books, it brings a lot of emotional and philosophical weight to the story. It deals with how Paul grapples with being a godlike figure, and how that affects his relationships, especially with Chani. The groundwork has already been laid in the first 2 films, which means Part 3 has the chance to tie everything together in a really powerful way. Now, if Dune Part 3 matches, or even surpasses, the success of its predecessors, the franchise could very well continue. There are several more books that could be adapted, and they go in some truly wild directions. But Paul's story, especially in the context of Chani and the moral weight he carries, would reach a natural conclusion by the end of Messiah. One of the key elements that Villeneuve could explore next is the introduction of Paul's son, Leto Atreides II. Although Paul ends up in a political marriage with Princess Irulan, it's Chani who bears his children, specifically twins named Leto II and Ganima. Tragically, Chani dies during childbirth, something Paul had been trying to prevent all along. Leto II becomes a major figure later on, and while he's just a baby in Messiah, introducing him in Part 3 could lay the foundation for future installments. Naming his son after Duke Leto, Paul's father, also creates a nice emotional link back to the first film. It shows that even as Paul becomes something larger than life, he still clings to personal connections. Leto II, despite being a baby in this story, eventually grows into the central figure of the Dune franchise in later novels like Children of Dune and God Emperor of Doom. Villeneuve could use this opportunity to begin setting up the next generation, even if he doesn't stick around to direct a fourth movie. That way, when Paul's story wraps up, the torch is ready to be passed. The potential is definitely there, especially if audiences respond positively to Leto II. And then there's Scytale, an incredibly intriguing character who's expected to appear in Dune Part 3. He's a face dancer, meaning he can mimic anyone's appearance, making him a master infiltrator. In Messiah, Scytale plays a pivotal role in the conspiracy to assassinate Paul. The book spends a lot of time following his point of view, which gives readers a glimpse into how outsiders perceive Paul's empire. Rumors suggest that Robert Pattinson might play Scytale, which could be a great fit. The character adds a psychological thriller vibe to the story, and Villeneuve's style lends itself well to that kind of slow-burning tension. Another important storyline involves the complex dynamic between Chani and Irulan. On the surface, it seems like a standard love triangle, but it's more complicated than that. While Paul's heart belongs to Chani, Irulan is politically significant. She needs an heir to secure her position, and her jealousy over Chani only fuels her darker motivations. She doesn't just compete for Paul's affection, she actively works to sabotage Chani's chances of carrying a child. That tension could play out in a very dramatic and emotional way on screen. Alongside all these personal conflicts, Messiah also delves into a larger political plot to overthrow Paul. Having waged a bloody holy war across the galaxy, he's made more enemies than allies, and now those enemies are plotting to bring him down. The Bene Gesserit and the Bene Tleilax, along with factions from other powerful groups, begin weaving a web of betrayal around Paul. This makes Part 3 less about grand battles and more about inner circles, espionage, and manipulation, which, if done right, can be just as gripping. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Your suggestions for future videos are always welcome in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay in the loop. And if you want, you can share your thoughts about this video in the comments.